Now, as far as the tax treatment made under a court order or legal process depends on the type of money that was contributed. A TSP account can consist of either the traditional TSP or the Roth TSP, or maybe both, the Roth and the traditional. Now, if the employee, if the former spouse receives the benefit and takes constructive receipt of it, then in that case, there's a potential that there could be taxation due intended or also ordinary income tax plus a 10% penalty. In the case of the Roth, if the money has been in the account for 5 years or age 59 and a half, whichever is longer, then the money that may be withdrawn from that account would come out tax-free. So there's some additional information that must be considered. And again, this material is not designed to replace the advice of a tax professional as it relates to distributions under the TSP. So as you can tell, the TSP is a little less complicated to get the money out, but there are some rules that have to be addressed regarding the potential taxation of the benefits if it's prior to age 59 and a half. We'll back up for just 1 second. So what we're referring to is the Civil Service Retirement Equity Act of '84. Again, it allows certain spouses of federal employees, former employees, and annuitants to qualify for health insurance under the FEHB. Now, in order to be eligible for the benefits, there's one of 4 requirements that they must meet. He or she was covered as a family member under the FEHB enrollment at least 1 day during the 18 months prior to the end of the marriage. He or she is entitled to receive a portion of the annuity after the employee retires or survivor annuity at the time of the employee retires or dies. He or she submits a written notice within 60 days after the divorce to the agency employing office where the federal employee worked at the time of the divorce, stating that he or she wants to continue the FEHB under the spousal equity provisions law. Now, if the divorce occurred after retirement, the employing office is now the retirement system. So what happens in this particular case is if the employee is still working, they will deal with the agency. If the employee is retired, then they will have to address these issues with OPM. Also, the other contingent factor is if that individual does not remarry prior to age 55 to keep the health insurance eligibility. So a former spouse who qualifies must enroll in his or her own right and must pay both the employer and the government share of the premium. So what that means is they are paying 100% of the cost. Now, coverage is prospective from the first day of the pay period after the employing office receives all properly completed qualifying documents. Now, what will happen in most cases to avoid a break in coverage, the former spouse may want to enroll for the temporary continuation of coverage under the TCC provision. So another thing that can occur is if a former spouse is not eligible to retain the coverage under the employee's family enrollment, they are no longer an eligible family member. A former spouse who does not qualify for one of those 4 conditions under the FEHB may apply for the temporary continuous coverage. So that would be that they would pay the employer the employee cost plus a 2% administration fee, and they would be limited to a 36-month period for which they could stay on the benefit, and then after that, they could convert to an individual policy with guaranteed insurability. So again, the cost to share is going to be the employer, the employee plus the 2%, and it can continue for up to 36 months. Now, COAP, granting the former spouse portions of the retirement annuity, provides the former spouse with a monthly payment after the employee retires and continues FEHB coverage until the employee dies. Now, a COAP providing a survivor benefit provides the former spouse with continuation FEHB coverage until the former spouse dies, but the annuity does not begin until the employee dies or retires. So there's 2 different ways. Again, this goes back to the apportionment while the employee is still working, and that means that the former spouse is receiving a benefit. The survivor benefit comes into play when that employee dies and they're retired. And in that case, the COAP would also want to address that. So that's another issue oftentimes that is overlooked or not properly addressed, is that the survivor benefit is available while they're alive and then also would continue upon the death of the federal employee.